Hi, this is Shambhavi. Welcome to my weekly podcast about spirituality, love, death, devotion, and waking up while living in a messy world. The Satsang with Shambhavi podcast is recorded live each week with students of our nonprofit community, Jaya Kula. For more information and to find out about attending a satsang, visit jayakula.org. Thanks for listening. Much love to you, wherever and however you are.
Could you talk about being dissatisfied?
Sure. I know something about it. There's an interesting combination in Jyotish where you have Saturn and Rahu together in your natal chart, and it's a recipe for chronic dissatisfaction. But it's also considered to be an excellent combination for Kriya Yoga and for spiritual life in general. That kind of says it all. If we can take our dissatisfaction onto our path, instead of assuming that we just deserve or should have everything be the way that we want it to be, if we're dissatisfied and we think everyone should line up and do what I want them to do, or I should get whatever I want, or things aren't right, or this is not fair, or there's something absolutely terrible about being dissatisfied, then it won't really go anywhere. But if we can see our dissatisfaction as part of our practice and as a spur to actually taking responsibility for our lives and what we want, then it's actually a very helpful kind of experience. In general, people are not remembering their practice enough. For instance, in the matter of dissatisfaction or some grievance or whatever it might be, whatever our characteristic emotional responses are. People are not remembering enough to invoke their practice in these moments, to bring these emotions and feelings onto your path, to try to experience those things through the lens of view in some way or another. In general, there are people who have been around Jaya Kula for a very long time who are, in my way of thinking, just not remembering often enough to bring whatever it is you're experiencing onto your path and relate to it through the skills that you have gained in your practice and from teachings. There are certain things that we can't help. I'm not saying we should bring stuff onto our path and that means it'll go away and we'll be fine. That's not what I mean. That's also still just spiritual materialism. We're using our practice to medicate or opiate in some cases, or fix things, or have control over things, or we have some spiritual idea that we should be able to mitigate every karma with our practice. And this just isn't true. Our practice is a factor. It's an important factor, but it's not the only factor. There's a whole cosmos, a whole reality collaborating with us in certain ways, and we don't have control over that. The only thing we do have control over, though, is that we keep putting one foot in front of the other and remembering to use our practice and do practice. That's really the only thing that we have control over. So you might remember to bring these feelings or circumstances onto your path to do some practice, or just remember what your life is really about or whatever, and then that emotion is still happening. It didn't go away. Maybe it's even still very, very strong. So what do? You just keep putting one foot in front of the other. This is like a really powerful gesture of modesty, confidence, honesty, maturity, etc. This has been called a mature path in the ancient texts, not by me. And part of it is because there's a lot of self-responsibility involved in how we relate to inevitable, uncomfortable things that we feel.
Can you say more about the spiritual materialism part of that?
Yeah, the spiritual materialism, the most overarching definition of that is that we have some particular goal in mind, something we want, and we're using our practice in a transactional way. Let's say you feel dissatisfied, and you say, okay, well, if I do mantra right now, this dissatisfaction has to go away. That's a transactional relationship to your practice. What you can say is that if you do practice right now, in the middle of your dissatisfaction, you don't know if it's going to go away or not, but you do know that it's a powerful gesture. And it is making a difference. You just don't know what it is most of the time or much of the time. But it is a very powerful gesture to invoke our practice just when we want to insist on our karmas. Because a lot of people feel like, when I feel badly, I have a right to feel this way. Or someone else should fix this for me. Or I should get a whole lot of other people involved in how badly I'm feeling, because that's what intimacy means to me. When we, in the midst of all that, remember to invoke our practice or view or just think of our teacher or something, anything, go in the heart space, look up at the sky, anything. That is a very powerful gesture. And those little gestures over time add up. Again, you can't know where, when, and how something is going to resolve, but things will resolve eventually.
Shambhavi, how does the medicine of practice related to difficulties, how does that relate to a feeling that a certain feeling state is intolerable? Like depression, sadness, anger, whatever.
Some things are intolerable, and we need other support besides sitting around thinking of our teacher or doing mantra. We can do that alongside other things like getting help from healthcare practitioners and doing things that are good forms of self-care and changing our life circumstances. There's a lot of things that people experience that are intolerable, and we need help. So we can do our practice and bring things onto the path. Even getting help can be part of bringing a circumstance onto our path. Being realistic about it, being practical about it. Understanding that we live in alliance and we should eagerly seek alliance. Not avoid it or reluctantly give in to the need for alliance. I really want the people that have been around in the community for a long time to reach for a little greater maturity in your practice and more effortfully bring things onto the path and take responsibility for things and try to reach for things like actually caring about how you're affecting other people and what kind of energy drain you might be putting on other people and what is your real relationship to me. This doesn't apply to all of you, but I think it's worth reminding people that in this particular kind of tradition, it is absolutely 100% not my job to support you in continuing with your karmas of suffering. Some of you are still making bids to get me and or other people to sort of just buy in and participate in your karmic patterns. And no one's expecting you to be able to drop them immediately, but it's not my job to make you feel better within the context of your karmas. It's not my job to placate your karmas. It's absolutely my job to do the opposite. And I think that in my life as a teacher, I've been a lot easier on people than my teachers were on me, just because of my perception that people are more fragile now than they used to be. But still in all, I still have a fundamental job as a teacher. Otherwise, I'm abdicating my seat, really, if I start just trying to reassure everyone or explain everything to reassure everyone. Actually, that's harmful. That is harmful if I were to do that. So I'd just like people to reach a little more for what I've been teaching you all these years, which is to really widen your circle of concern, to think about the effect of what you're doing on other people, to actually care. Like, to think about your effect on other people, not just as like, it's a good thing to do, or it's ethical, or I'll be a better person if I do it, and then Shambhavi will like me more or something. I mean, no, this tradition is not about that. It's about actually going into your heart or wherever you need to go. I don't care if it's your left big toe. Just like go there if that's where you need to go to feel concern for other people's well-being. So it relates to what I was saying in response to you about alliance. We live in a totally interconnected, seamless circumstance with every other thing and being in all of existence. And our job in this kind of tradition is to discover that, to rediscover that. As long as we're still in my me, myself, and iPod, then we can't discover that. I've done pretty much everything I can do, and I continue to do, to help people to widen their circle of concern and caring. In a natural way, not an ethical finger-wagging way. That doesn't work. Then you get a bunch of people just running around saying nice things to each other. That's not what we're talking about. I actually want you to care about each other, it turns out. And this goes to when you are experiencing some difficult karmas, like frustration or anger or sadness or whatever it is, and you're still having your circle of concern be wider than just me, myself, and iPod. That's a big ask, but that is what this is about. That's actually what it's about. As Abhinavagupta put it, the end of this path is being all for others, being like a fountain of generosity and care for others. That's what the end of this all is. So we have to start somewhere. We can't just be shits until the very nth day and then suddenly expect to care about everyone. We do a pretty good job, but then when things get tough, even some of the people that have been around for a very long time forget. And it just goes out the window. Maybe it's because I'm getting older. I'm now demanding that you wake up faster. Maybe this is self-serving. I don't know. But I do think you could be putting in a little more effort.
I have a question. Does God make mistakes or feel regret?
God makes a scribillion mistakes and feels infinite barrels of regret through us as God's means of experiencing everything that could possibly be experienced. But if you mean in some more absolute sense, no. Since nothing is actually happening, there's nothing to feel regret about. Things are experiences. Everything that we think is happening is actually an experience of this alive, aware reality. Something they're experiencing within themselves. So nothing is happening externally or objectively. So there's literally, I'll have to get back to saying that, literally. Yeah, it's been a while. It's part of my anti-aging program, as I'm going to return to things I used to say. There's literally nothing to feel regret about or make a mistake about. But through us and the absolute finitude of possible experiences, this alive aware reality is experiencing all the regret that exists and making all the mistakes that could ever be made. That was a great question.
Yeah, it came to me just because I was thinking about how we are emanations of God, and that one of the things I've learned from practice and from you is that making mistakes is part of being human and can be a helpful part of being human.
If you never made a mistake, you would be denying God that experience.
So we're taking one for the team. Let me make it.
Taking one for the team. Yeah, it's a good question to ask. It's one of those questions that sometimes people are afraid to ask. So I think it's good. And when we use words like emanation or expression, we don't mean like something is literally emanating from within to the outside of something. We mean that something appears as if it were outside of something. In other words, the possibility of dualistic experience, that something would be outside of you and separate from you. When we say emanation, we mean that possibility of that creative expression appearing as if it were outside of God or we were outside of each other. That's what makes all of these experiences possible. But there's nothing really emanating anywhere. It's just a way of talking about dualistic experience. We have this whole raft of words that we use that refer to our immediate experience, but then they're understood in a very particular way if we also maintain the view that everything is oneself and everything is happening within that self, and that subjectivity or I sense, self-reflection, is the foundation of reality. There's no like objective world that is the foundation, and then like subjectivity sort of an add-on or a plug-in or something. That's what Western rationalistic philosophy and science says. And of course, our view of subjectivity is extremely limited, or we could say consciousness. And we keep discovering more and more beings have self-awareness and even language, ability to learn our language even. We're really just at the very baby phase of understanding all of that. Our Western science is like literally in kindergarten in terms of that. This is why it really irks me when people want to have science explain these kinds of spiritual views and practices. It's like the toddler explaining it to the grandparent, you know. Science can get some stuff done, and that's great, but it doesn't understand reality, really.
Is there an aspect of dualistic existence where imperfection is built into it? Because it is dualistic, there is no way that anything can be perfect here.
If we're talking about from our perspective, yes, that's true. But if we're talking about from the perspective of the whole, there's never any imperfection. So if you saw two paintings side by side in a museum, and one of them was a painting of great destruction and another was a painting of a flowering grove or something, you wouldn't say that the painting of great destruction was depicting a mistake. It could be an incredible painting of destruction.
Well, suppose there was a painting, to take another example, a painting where the painter forgot to put in like something in the corner of the painting. So it's like there's a little bit of blank canvas there that the painter forgot.
Hey, then it would sell for more money. No, I don't know. I get your point though. But there's no actual mistakes happening and there's no actual imperfection. There are plays of imperfection and plays of mistakes. And they're dramas. They're like storylines. You've never made a mistake in your entire life from an absolute view. It's like an actor's in a movie, and it says in the script, you trip over the curb while going to catch a cab. And then the actor does that. Is that a mistake? No. That's perfection of acting tripping on a curb really well. So you literally have never made a mistake.
So what is the messing up if not a mistake?
It's God playing the part of someone making a mistake. With expertise in your case. I just said that to be funny, but really the expertise is equal everywhere. You haven't been singled out.
In India, we talk about niyati, which is a word that is used to like infallible destiny, it could mean.
Destiny, like fate?
Yeah. And sometimes there's a way in which Indians or Indian stories portray avatars like Krishna as having a niyati, as having a fate, which Krishna cannot escape. If he has to die in this sort of way, it's pre-written.
It's his fate to bring in the Kali Yuga. He has to do that.
Yeah.
Right.
So the avatar and that, and what is the play of that? I don't ever hear the word niyati in Trika.
Well, it could be there. I just don't know. I've never seen it, but that doesn't mean it hasn't been there. It's really hard to answer that question because who's writing those stories? And those stories, like all of the stories of all of the Puranas and the epics, are written by multiple authors over many, many, many years, sometimes hundreds of years. There's different viewpoints expressed in the same text, and people are writing about what they know, and it's not like everybody contributing to those stories is highly realized. So it's really hard to make a judgment about why Krishna might be portrayed that way. The other thing about Krishna, though, I would say particularly, and I'm really just riffing, I don't really know in an absolute sense, but he's very funny, and he's a super trickster. He's one of the funniest deities, and one of the most playful deities, if not the most playful deity. When he talks about what he must do or what he must not do, he could be laughing inside. How seriously he takes the Kali Yuga, I don't know. Impossible to tell. And I also assume that he was a real person because I know of Ma. If I didn't know of Ma, I might not feel he was a real person, or I might be less sure that it's possible. But because I know of Ma and have direct experience of her, in a sense, I do think that those avatars were real people. Who knows what they were really like. But knowing what Ma was like, she did lots of stuff related to the question that you just asked about fate and things avatars have to do or can't do. She urged people very strongly to practice, and she instructed people very strongly in how to move or what to choose or what not to choose, and etc. And yet she, more than anyone, knew that it was all a play, all playful. Yet when she delivered those instructions, she was serious. She appeared to be serious and like, this must be done this way, right? So I think there's a sense in which, from my experience of Ma, that the avatars are playing along in our world, and in a sense they're speaking to our condition. That's part of the script. But whether they have to do what they're doing, I don't know. I have no idea.
The job description of an avatar.
Yeah, exactly.
What's the difference between that and Dharma? Because in the Bhagavad Gita and Mahabharata, Krishna talks a lot about Dharma. I mean, they all do, all the characters.
Well, Ma defined Dharma as anything that moves us towards self-realization. So Dharma, in a literal sense, means our duty. And as you probably heard me joking about before, that could mean something incredibly mundane. And when you're just talking to somebody in India, they could throw that word into a conversation when they're just referring to, like, what is my duty to carry your groceries for you or something like that. But if we're talking about it more in this context, I think Dharma is that which leads us to realization. It's a circumstance, our activities, our choices, opportunities, skills, etc. All of that is Dharma. And because Ma said, human beings only have one duty, and that is to wake up. And that duty is built in. It's not something we adopt from externally. We discover within ourselves that it's actually a desire to know more about reality and be more awake. It's really built into us, and not everybody discovers it in this particular lifetime, but some people do. And when we do discover it, you don't feel like it's something out there that you've just taken on, but something that you feel you want. So that's what Dharma is. Dharma is all those things that are helping you get what you want.
So avatars don't have Dharma because they are Dharma.
That's right. They don't have Dharma because they're no longer on a path. Dharma only belongs to creatures on a path. The experience, the adventure of the journey is the arc story. The larger story among all these zillions of episodes that are happening all over the planet. The arc story is this journey toward waking up. And that's built in, but it is part of the story. And that path itself is playfulness. I mean, there really isn't any path. God has nowhere to go. Satsang with Shambhavi is produced by Jaya Kula, a nonprofit community offering opportunities to learn and practice in the direct realization traditions of Trika Shaivism and Dzogchen. If you enjoyed listening, please help us keep this podcast and many other teachings open to all by making a monthly or one-time donation. Visit jayakula.org to make a donation and explore more of our offerings.